Hello and welcome back to the SaaS Marketing Weekly podcast with me, your host Ryan, the founder of Rocket SaaS, and we are back in the studio with Jamie. Hello, welcome back.
Yeah, back again.
So this episode, we are talking about content creation and the importance of investing your marketing budget into content creation. We're seeing so many brands getting distracted with the latest AI tools and hacks and like shortcuts and just trying to pump more money into LinkedIn ads, and it's just not quite working.
Love ads.
But if your content isn't very good and you're not consistently creating a good rhythm of high quality content, then don't be surprised when, your company doesn't scale. You're not going to get the inbound leads. There's only so many ads that you can do to the bottom of the funnel. We really need to get some good content creation happening in 2026 at the top and the middle and the bottom of the funnel in order for you to really scale the business. So what we see a lot of brands doing is just, being lazy with their content creation, like a lot of AI slop obviously going out, people just not having a budget to invest in content. People think that content creation budget only should really go into ads and the in-house team can just create content on their own. But if the in-house team, they're probably only going to be able to write content and unlike to be kind of video editors and not going to have their own like studios and things. But we're going to talk today about actually investing money into content, into high quality content, because what that can do is it can really elevate your brand and the perception of your brand. So a lot of people just, create written content and they don't really invest in other forms of content. So therefore your content just doesn't look particularly premium. Anyone can have a blog. So Rocket SaaS, for example, we've invested in this studio. So a lot of people see us on LinkedIn video clips and YouTube, and it just elevates the brand and the content that we create, which just makes us go up market. It makes us more recognizable and well known. So this podcast has been a great example of how we've taken budget, invested it into content creation. It's elevated the brand and it's just massively supported the ads. It makes our company look just more impressive because of the quality. And that obviously has a massive impact in terms of brand awareness and lead gen. So I'm going to talk about a few different examples of putting budget into content. So Jamie, I know you've got a few different ideas of how you can do this, but give us your first one.
Yeah. I feel passionately about this, to be fair, because I've talked a lot about ads on this podcast, and I do love ads. I love ads. I love working on it. It's really something that I really enjoy it, but it's one of the biggest levers we underuse is creative. And like all that we do in B2B SaaS usually is pour more money into the ad platforms, which means that we're just higher CAC, especially if we're pouring it into like content that's bad, like higher CAC, higher cost per lead. Everything goes up. Ads aren't working. That's what it can lead to when you're kind of spending all of your money on just the ad platforms. So a few ideas that I think are really important for B2B SaaS brands to embrace, especially as kind of moving into 2026. I think some of these are going to be increasingly important. But first one, so at the top of the funnel, like you mentioned earlier, typically what we see is like kind of generic blogs, generic guides, maybe things made with AI and like there's no real kind of substance behind it. That can be quite typical. To stand out, like things that I like definitely notice as a marketer, but I think in B2B SaaS in general and B2B, original research. So original research from companies is massive. It's just obviously just having an original insight that other brands aren't sharing is going to get you noticed. It's not hard to kind of figure it out. It gives it credibility, it gives it social proof, gives it weight. So things like surveys and surveying your audience is like an incredible investment to make. And there's loads of tools out there now that's actually starting to like speak to this need. So even like a tool like Winter, which we mentioned on the podcast before, like you can run a survey to 100 people and it is an investment, right? But you can get data about like problems that you solve, right? Or like about the market. And all of a sudden you've got a whole data, a whole kind of data set that you can break down and basically give like a market insight report for like the year and stuff like that, which is based on real insights from real buyers in your market. And that's going to help you stand out. So I would argue that the money is better spent often there on that initial piece of content than on spending another couple of $1,000 or pounds on more ads to the same content that you ran last year that wasn't working, which is what a lot of B2B brands will continue to do.
Yes, particularly on LinkedIn ads. Companies are spending thousands of pounds on ads and they're not getting a return, and they just keep running it and keep running it. If you just take £2,000, for example, and put it into content creation and then you run it again, you're going to get, you should get much better results if you've got better content. So to use try and get a specific example of that. So if I use myself as an example, so I own an agency So if I saw on my LinkedIn feed that there was some kind of a report that said, here is we've surveyed 100 marketing agencies in the UK, and in this report we're going to reveal the average number of leads an agency gets each month, the average price that an agency charges, the typical kind of model or org chart that agencies use, the typical kind of problems that agencies are trying to solve, or blah blah blah. Yeah, all these different things that I care about because that's my job, and I can benchmark it against essentially my competition. I'm going to download that report. I'm definitely going to download that guy because that's what keeps me up at night. That's what I think about. And also like benchmarking my business against other similar businesses is a great hook. Everybody's kind of, wondering what the competition are doing, wondering, or like maybe like what tools agencies are using. I'd love to know that. People just have got that kind of competitive mindset. So yeah, that's a great example. And also with SaaS clients, or SaaS businesses, I should say, you have data, presumably, like most SaaS platforms are collecting lots and lots of data from their customers' accounts. Obviously, you can turn that into a report. You obviously need to anonymize it and not get in any trouble with your customers. But you can, what I'm trying to say is that to create that report that Jane was talking about, you should have the data. A lot of businesses will have that data. So for example, if you had a SaaS platform for an e-commerce brand, for multiple e-commerce brands, let's say you had 100 e-commerce customers and your platform did like analytics of their e-commerce businesses, for example, you would have data on 100 different e-commerce businesses on their abandoned cart rates and how many support tickets they do each month and how many the average price of a product or how many money off vouchers they do per year. That data in your platform, for example. So it shouldn't be that hard to just speak to the product team and turn that data into a report. As I said, you've got to anonymize it, but you can create some kind of benchmarking guide around that.
And if like the product team aren't willing to help out, which can be a thing in businesses, then pay someone. This is what I mean. Like, I think that's a worthwhile investment. Pay someone to help with breaking down that data if it's a resource issue. But like that alone, like you just mentioned, in all of those insights from your product, that is a massive, massive like treasure trove of things unique to you that you can share. And all of a sudden your content goes from being like ordinary, if you're just basing like just general kind of content, to you've got something original and like interesting to share. And like that's such a worthwhile investment.
I'm going slightly left field here. Let me know if you want to edit this bit out. But Spotify Wrapped.
Yep.
Spotify Wrapped.
Course, yeah.
I think at our Christmas party you were asking me about my Spotify. Everyone's talking about Spotify Wrapped. It's one of the greatest marketing campaigns that's ever been created. The old Spotify Wrap. Everyone's been talking about it for years.
Yeah.
But that's what they're doing. They're using their data that they have on you, and they're just reformatting it into essentially it's a report, isn't it? Here's a report for you, and these are all your songs that you listen to and all this data. And obviously they turn into a fancy pants animation thing, which is amazing.
Yeah.
But that's an example of how Spotify are taking their data and using it, because essentially it is a marketing campaign, because they know that Spotify Wrapped makes half of the world talk about Spotify at the pub or at the Christmas party. Oh, what's your Spotify app? And you can share it with each other. So that example is not like they don't take, I guess, the mass data of everybody. Well, they do actually. In another type of report, they tell you, like when we do our quizzes, we do a monthly quiz here at Rocket SaaS. I'm often asking things like, who is the most played artist in July 2025 kind of thing, because Spotify tell you that data. So that's an example of Spotify just taking data, turning it into reports, which people find very, very interesting, whether it's about themselves or about their competition or just about the market in general. So that is good. Let's not edit that bit.
That's actually I think that's a really good addition. So we're going to keep that on. But also I think, Joe, what, now you've said that, that's the other bit of this that I think is interesting, and the investment pays off when you start thinking it through, is if you invest in that, the product, say with the product data or whatever data you're securing, so shareability of that content increases so much. So what you've invested in, if you've got really interesting data from the product, that becomes so much more shareable by your audience, and all of a sudden you're getting reach that you would never have secured otherwise. And so all of a sudden that initial investment, which some people can be like, oh, I don't want to spend money on the content, once you've actually got over that hurdle, you start realizing the potential of it, it far outstrips what you were doing before, because all of a sudden you've got content that's actually interesting, original, shareable, gets shared into other people's Slack channels, on LinkedIn, stuff like that. It's massive for the business.
Yeah, to go back to that example that I said, if there was an agency benchmarking report of all those the facts and stats that I personally cared about, if it was decent, I'm definitely sharing it with you. I'm sharing it with the CFO. I might stick it in the general Slack channel for everybody. I'm going to send it to my mate who owns an agency. I feel like I've got something special and unique.
Yeah.
It's not just a half decent blog that I read. I feel like I've got something really valuable that someone's taken the time to create and put budget into investing into it. And also investing into making it look nice. So again, to go back to the example of Spotify, how much have they invested in creating that amazing animation for Spotify Wrapped? If they just sent it to you as a blog, the campaign would borderline flop.
Yeah.
People would still share it, but probably 1% of what they do, because it's such a cool, fancy animation. So I'm not saying go to the levels of Spotify, because you're a startup, but you can employ a freelance designer, or if you have a designer in house, you can get them to turn it into a pretty cool looking fancy ebook. Again, as Jamie said, just makes it more shareable, more interesting, more kind of entertaining when you put a bit of budget into it. So yeah, don't just default back to the blog, because that's the easiest thing to do and it's the cheapest thing to do. Invest a little bit of money into actually creating a well-designed guide, white paper, ebook. Will just massively support the just engagement rates. So that's a good example. So let's go to the next example.
Yeah. So the next one, and I think this is actually going to be increasingly important, and you're seeing it more and more in B2B SaaS, is influencer programs and working with B2B influencers and infusing that into all of your content. So I think this is actually probably one of the biggest tactics to I guess essentially get out of the ad channels a bit. Like, ads are a massive part of what like a lot of B2B SaaS businesses are going to be running. It's going to be a big part of your growth engine, but obviously costs are going up. So you don't want to be completely reliant on them on their own. And that's where kind of things like an influencer and having the right kind of partnership with influencers can be massive. So like, good example, kind of like from when I was working at Cognizant, the way we worked with influencers was we would select influencers and set up long-term agreements over the year, and we would have them basically sharing our content in their words. So for example, like they would be posting regularly about content we're producing, adding commentary to it, sharing it to their audience, which gives us massive reach, credibility from the person, infuses that into the content, which is really helpful. The other side to it as well, would they be like co-hosting webinars and podcasts and stuff with us all the time. So they'd be contracted to work certain numbers of kind of like those engagements. So then all of a sudden, we've got someone who's really relevant in the industry, big audience, coming into our webinars every like week or two, etc. And that was massive, because essentially we got an expert who's just infusing everything into our content, lending that credibility, lending another voice, which was massive. Gave us additional reach, tapped into a new audience, etc. So obviously, startups, right? Not every startup's going to be able to strike an agreement like that, but you can invest in lots of different ways. That could be individual posts. So you maybe just get some influencers, maybe you're launching a new guide, a white paper, etc. You're getting people to post about it. You can pay them to post about it, add their thoughts to it, etc. Or you just get them on a webinar. You co-host a webinar with them. And that's a really worthwhile investment, because all of a sudden that webinar, like everyone does webinars pretty much, like in B2B, like most companies do webinars. But how many webinars do you really, really stick out? They're often the ones, either the really good content or there's really good guests. So if you can pay to shortcut your way to a really good guest, I would argue sometimes maybe you don't do that webinar each month. Maybe in one quarter you do one big webinar with an influencer if you've got a small budget and you really put a big bet on it and you test that and try it. But there's lots of different ways to approach it. But an influencer program, I think, is going to be increasingly important.
Yeah. And how do you go about finding influencers? I know there's various different influencer platforms, influencer agencies, or are you saying you should sort of start with your customers? Yeah. B2B SaaS, it's hard. Like obviously
it's trickier in B2B.
Yeah. Like influencers, there's loads for B2C and like fashion brands and all those things. But most of the people that listen to this podcast are B2B SaaS brands. Often not quite the typical influencer-y world. Kim Kardashian's not promoting with cybersecurity SaaS platform, is she?
No.
She may do. But not at the moment. So where do you begin in terms of looking for influencers?
Yeah. So, I mean, like, it depends on who the customer is, I suppose. Like, for example, like us as marketers, so obviously we might serve other marketers, so we might know who has influence in our space. So we can probably have quite a good, like if we want to go partner with someone, we've got probably good insight into who to go partner with because we are the audience.
So we would look at our customers.
Yeah.
We would, again, this could be a job for a VA, or you could just know this yourself. Basically go through all of your customers, all of the sort of people that you're speaking to that you know use the platform, go on all of their LinkedIn profiles and look at the top 10 people that got the highest number of followers.
Yeah. Who they're engaging with, like who they're commenting on, like who are the, if you, I suppose probably a good way, like you just mentioned, if you're starting back from the customer, just think about kind of like, go on to like, who's the ideal customers that you work with, like pick some out and see who they're following, engaging with, talking to, etc.
Yeah. Either the individual who's got the highest number of followers from an individual level, or they just work for a big brand.
Yeah.
Because you could have somebody that isn't much of an influencer themselves in terms of they don't create much content on LinkedIn, they're not particularly active, but they love the platform and they work for a household name brand. That's really good too, because if they start promoting it and you can put the logo, it's from this company, people may not know the person, but they'll know the company. So it's you can call it a traditional influencer, but it has that influence because of the brand.
Yeah. But it's all just about investing to get credibility, more reach. And again, it's like going back to that shareability thing. Like if you've got a really great voice involved in the content, it becomes more shareable. Like if we've got like someone massive in our space who's joining us for a webinar, then obviously like they have an audience, and that audience then gets shared around, it gets distributed. That's a massive wins. I think that's a really safe investment, and I think that's something that increasingly B2B brands should be looking at.
Yeah. Okay, and then the next one on our list, I believe, is the podcast studio.
Yes.
So investing in podcasts. I'll also throw in a similar thing as investing into breakfast events. We've obviously talked about both of these things already numerous times in the podcast, but that's something that Rocket SaaS have invested in 2025 for the first time, is this very studio that we're sat in now. All of the podcasts the previous year in 2024 used to be in my spare bedroom at home. And then this year we decided to invest. I think it costs about, I can't remember what it is now. I think it's like 150 quid for a 90-minute session, something like that.
And when you think about that, that is nothing. Well, when you compare it to what people throw into ads, like that is such a minimal investment that can go such a long way to making what you do on the ads better. This is kind of the key.
Well, that's true. Yeah. So 150 quid. And when we do a session, we record 2 episodes at least. Sometimes we squeeze 3 out of it. There's additional budget that goes into an editor editing the podcast, which is again, not a lot. It's around probably total investment really, because we do 2 in one go. It's around about 100 quid an episode really, which like you say is very, very little, particularly when you talk about the ROI. So if we've done in this studio this year, we've probably done, I don't know, maybe 20 episodes in this studio. So that's about 2 grand that I've invested into that, maybe 3, not much more than that. So let's call it 3 grand that we've invested into this, the premium, giving the content piece of the podcast an uplift. What's been the ROI? The ROI has been about probably 10,000%. I would say if it's a quick maths there.
I mean, we can go back through, like I was going through our self-reported attribution responses. So like the how did you hear about us filled in our demo form. And like, since we started doing this podcast, you can increasingly see podcasts come from that field, and it's a massive win.
Yeah, so people, we do sales calls with clients that we go on to work with, and we always ask them, how did you hear about us? A lot of them increasingly are saying the podcast. And so some people find us directly because of the podcast, or some people are very heavily influenced by the podcast. They'll find us on LinkedIn, so that's how they kind of know us at first, but then they end up listening to the podcast 30 times, then they become a customer. Yeah. So me investing about 3 grand into giving the podcast a lift has been one of the smartest investments I made in 2025. So that's a quick example. The other one is similar vein, is the breakfast events. So we used to just do webinars, which we still do. Webinars are great, but now we started to do, every couple of months we do a breakfast event. So we go to like a Caravan restaurant in London or the Ivy, and rather than doing a webinar event, we invite people in London to come and have a breakfast and have a chat, which is similar format to a webinar. We're teaching people, it's obviously a bit more of a round table and networking, but that's investment. That cost me more than what a webinar would cost. So yeah, but really when you do it in like a normal restaurant setting, you just book a table for 10 people. I've just got to pick up the bill for breakfast. Breakfast is relatively cheap compared to the other 2 meals in the day. So I think the one we did the other day, we had like 12 people, bought them coffee and breakfast, and the bill cost me like 250 quid or something like that. And then off the back of that, we got 3 deals. So we created 180K in pipeline from a £250 spend. So again, absolutely incredible return. So that's another way. If you are doing webinars, don't cost you much at the moment. If you're doing podcasts sort of in your spare bedroom, it's not costing much at the moment. What would happen if you put a bit of content budget into those things? Suddenly you're elevating that content. Your content's becoming so much better and just more memorable. The brand awareness increases, the general engagement increases. Don't be surprised when lead gen increases too. So that's another example. Let's move on to the next one. We've done user generated content. We've done industry reports. We've done the podcast / breakfast events. What's the fourth one?
This is one I actually think is quite interesting and is underused at the moment, is basically working with like creators online and actors, and basically it's more and more accessible to go on platforms like even like Upwork and stuff like that, where you can hire people to create kind of like interesting video content for you at a very kind of affordable rate. So for example, let's say that I, as a marketer, am putting together some product videos for our product next year, right? So I put together some general product videos. What typically B2B SaaS brands will do is like they'll employ a freelancer video person, and what they'll do is they'll create like animated kind of classic product videos, which is nothing wrong with them, right? But they are pretty standard for B2B SaaS platforms, like explainer videos. Nothing wrong with them. They have their place. They're really useful. But what I would say is actually something that can really upgrade those videos and make them much more suitable, particularly for your ad platforms and social platforms, is work with an actor or a creator to start doing like hooks for you or doing like skits for you to kind of describe the product and stuff like that. Basically working, there's loads of platforms out there now, and they don't even have to be B2B specific in this case. This is more about creating video content that's interesting and engaging with real people. And you don't necessarily have to be involved, because there's certain platforms where you can go on. I just can't get a certain name for this, and we can maybe include in the description. But there was one I used to use at my old job where we used to have a creator who wasn't a B2B SaaS specific creator or anything. They just created video content. But basically we would brief them on the videos we wanted created, and they would create that. And within a week, we'd have 3 to 4 clips for a couple of £100. And that would be able to use on our social platforms, on our ad platforms, to promote our content, to promote our product. Just depends on what videos we wanted done in that week. But that's another really good example. For a few £100, all of a sudden you've got content that you can create much better hooks for your video, and like to actually ground that in like results. So if you think about the videos you're putting out, you're investing, right, thousands in these product videos sometimes over the number of months that you're running them, right? If you have a really standard product video, right, let's say that then like you engage like a typical engagement rate for LinkedIn, let's say that 0.5% of people are engaging with video or clicking through from the video, right? If you have a really engaging hook that grabs people in the feed, right, and it gets people caught into it, and then you have a really effective video, right, it could potentially double the number of people engaging with it. So a jump from 0.5 to 0 to 1%. So that's double the amount of people who are actually, one, engaging with the video, but then 2, clicking through to your website, discovering the product. You're spending thousands. When you actually think about the reach and the number of people clicking through, and that little jump can do, that few £100 is actually such a small investment just to get much better content that works harder. So I think that's actually a really important thing as well, is like thinking about like all of the resources online available to you now, creators, actors, all things that are so accessible compared to what would have been available before.
Yeah, true. Yeah. So, we use Fiverr to hire presenters. So, I see a lot of B2B SaaS websites have a Loom video of the founder or the head of product, or just presenting the product on Loom, and it's just kind of a bit dull, it's a bit boring. And if you compare it to like a big competitor, like, I don't know, Monday.com, it's got this super slick video, it's just like night and day. And obviously you're not going to have the budget of some of these like huge competitors to do something crazy, but nowadays it doesn't cost that much to hire an expert from like an Upwork or a Fiverr just to really give it a lift. And it's, as you said earlier, it's often, if your ads are underperforming, which for most brands they are, just taking some of that budget from the ads, focusing on creating better content, and then putting the budget back into the ads. Your budget is the same, but you've ended up with much better content creation, and probably lead gen is not going to be affected if the ads aren't working right now. But when you relaunch the ads with better content, that's what's going to happen. You are going to get more leads essentially because your whole brand and content has been elevated. So that's it. That is one of our main pieces of advice for 2026 is don't just keep plowing money into ads, particularly if the ads aren't really working at the moment. Take some budget out of the ads, put it into content creation, and don't just continue to create content in-house, just writing blogs all the time and trying to design your own ebooks. And it's often not an efficient use of time. Take some budget, give it to an expert, make it look fantastic, or put effort into actually creating better content with the research pieces that Jamie has spoken about. Get out of your home and your office and go to studios and breakfast events. Investing into content is an amazing way just to elevate the whole brand, give it a lift. And when you pump that content with ads, people look at your brand very, very differently. And it can even enable you to increase your pricing because you suddenly become a much more premium looking brand. So if you've got a problem with, the CAC's too high and you just want to be landing bigger deals, elevating content is also an amazing way to do that. So good luck with it all. And I will see you next week on the SaaS Marketing Weekly podcast.